Emily Barros. I'm the founder of Bold Story Press. I really stopped using a specific number at some point, but somewhere between 35 and 40 years of publishing experience. Most of that, all but 2 years of that in the traditional publishing industry. My last role in traditional publishing was as editor-in-chief of a division of McGraw-Hill in New York. So I started out 37 years ago as an editorial assistant. I had just graduated from college. I moved to New York. The pay was $10,000 a year. I jumped on it. I saw myself as the next William Perkins, a great editor. And I started working in this industry. I started out in the college textbook industry, which was a very fascinating, piece of publishing, just surrounded by very, very smart people, working with the smartest professors from the best universities in the world, really. And the way publishing was set up when I started out, it was an apprenticeship model where you started out usually in a entry-level position. In my case, I started as an editorial assistant. And then they wanted you to have experience in all major facets of the business. So they wanted you to have marketing experience, sales experience, editorial experience, so that when you got into positions of leadership, you really understood what made a book successful and what factors contributed to a book taking off and being a best-selling book as opposed to a book with modest or very low sales. When I started out, the industry was much smaller, though there were many more publishers, because there were small publishers and mid-sized publishers in the traditional industry, and they're all gone now. During those years, I watched the larger publishers eat up the smaller publishers and then the mid-sized publishers until there were only 5 traditional publishing houses left today. And interestingly, none of them are US owned anymore. They're all owned by the Europeans, the Germans, the Dutch, the British. And the book, of course, the book selling platforms changed radically too. When I started out, of course, there was no such thing as online books. And so when one wanted to buy a book, you went to a bookstore. And there were hundreds and thousands of independent bookstores, as well as many bookstore chains. And they slowly but surely have gone out of business, largely because of the introduction of digital books and Amazon to the publishing industry. Today, 80% of books are sold on Amazon, and the split of ebook versus print books is still, it changes from market to market, genre to genre, but it's still about 50-50 print and ebooks. So if you want to write and publish a book one day, I think it's useful to look at what your motivations are for your goal. I've worked with authors with all of the following motivations and seen some of them succeed and some of them fail. But I've worked with authors who are passionate about the topic. They're usually that's in nonfiction writing, and it's the topic of their research or their life's work, and they're passionate about that work and they want to share that passion with others. And those folks tend to write textbooks or other nonfiction books of survey books and expert books in a topic. Some authors describe having a feeling of having a book inside of them that they need to get out. And often when I've heard that, they have a pretty well thought out structure for a book, a table of contents, maybe down to the A heads or B heads. And they have a good idea of the plot or or the structure and organization of that book. And then they have to go in and fill in, of course, all of the detail, fleshing out those chapters until they've created a book of 60 to 80,000 words. Some authors, and it's rare, but occasionally I've heard authors describe their experience as having a fully formed book within them, where their job is just to get it onto the page. And they describe it almost as that they're channeling the book, because the book is there in all its detail, all its character development, all of its plot laid out, and they just have to get it onto the page. Some authors some authors write to make money, though there are far fewer authors with that motivation today than there were 10 years ago, because it is more difficult to make money in the publishing industry today because of the sheer number of books that are being published every year now. We think that there are up to 2 million new books being published every year now, and we're not sure of that number because a large number of those books are being uploaded to Amazon KDP, where an author writes a book and takes their Word file and formats it and uploads it to Amazon, and they've got a print book and an ebook. And Amazon does not disclose how many books are being published that way each year. So some of this is guesswork, but it's a lot. Some authors write to establish themselves as an authority in their field. And often entrepreneurs write books for this reason. There is something about telling the world that you are a published author that for many people means that you have an instant stamp of authority, of expertise. Most people don't know how to figure out if you self-published that book or published it with a credible publisher. And very few people know how to look at your Amazon book ranking and figure out what your sales are from the book. So you can upload that file to Amazon and never sell a single copy. But when people hear that you are an author of a book in your field, they often assume you're an expert. So many entrepreneurs feel like it's a credential. It's a credential that everyone has to have if they are running their own business. And then finally, authors write to leave a legacy. And I'm talking about the memoirs now, where people are motivated by wanting to share their family history or their personal history so that others in the world and specifically family and future generations will have that story. You also should be thinking about, for whom are you writing your book? Who will want your book? Who will pay for your book? What do you know about them? And how will you reach them? At McGraw-Hill, when I was an editor, an acquisitions editor, I often had my authors fill out that marketing questionnaire form before they started writing or very early in the writing process. And I asked them to do that because I wanted them to have a very clear sense of who their target reader was. The more specific and the clearer they were about who their readers were, the more helpful it was to them as they were writing the book. If they got stuck, they could think about who that reader was, what that reader would enjoy seeing in terms of more example, more explanation, more anecdotes, whatever content their readers would enjoy. Having a better understanding of who the readers are helps authors. I think it's worth thinking about this question. To become the published author you wish to be, do you need to make any changes? And I'm talking about to your routine, to your life. If you always do what you've always done, you'll always get what you've always gotten. That's been my experience. And I am one of those people who's been saying for probably 30 years that someday I'm going to write a book. And yet I haven't changed my day-to-day routine. I haven't carved out sacred time where every day I sit at my computer and am committed to writing during that time. And so until I do that, I think that my goal is a shaky one. This is another quote that I love, and particularly as it pertains to women authors. This is from Marianne Williamson. Our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, and fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? Your playing small does not serve the world. There's nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. And I love that quote because I grew up in a culture where I was taught to be a people pleaser. Definitely grew up in a culture where the women in my family, in my school, we were perfectionists. We thought we had to get things done perfectly before we submitted them. I was also taught to be modest and to not put myself in situations where I was being braggadocious or too big for my britches. And I think all of those cultural messages interfere with a woman's ability to write a book, to write their story, to make the decision that what they have is good enough, and to let go of that story and turn it over to someone who can give you an objective analysis, objective feedback about your book, and help you get that book to the point where it will be of the highest quality and it will be published as something that you can be proud of. So I think culturally, there are so many messages ingrained in young women that get in our way of success. And that's why I like this quote and like sharing this quote. I'm going to quickly cover 5 basic phases of the publishing process, just to give you an overview of what you have to look forward to. There's writing, editing, design, production, and launching or promoting your book. So in terms of writing, a few thoughts I have to share with you. There are different writing styles. Different styles work for different people. There is no one style that ensures your success or your failure, frankly. The 2 styles that I run into most frequently in my publishing career are the planners. So those are the folks who are more process driven, who think in ways, in organized ways, who lay out their book with a table of contents and then go in and add more detail to that table of contents, maybe adding A heads and B heads so that they're creating more detailed sections of their story. And then they go back and write a paragraph that describes each chapter, and they take a look at that and evaluate it, decide that looks right, and they can start writing. And then they go in and they lay down the framework for each chapter, flesh out that chapter, and create the content for the whole book. That's an organized way to approach the process, and it works for many, many people. The other most common style that I see, and this isn't good or bad, but they have a name called pantsers, and I am a pantser, which means that we are more likely to fly by the seat of our pants when it comes to writing content and creating our structure. And the way I approach writing is I download my brain, everything I can think of about my topic, onto the page. And I am working on a novel right now, my first. And that's the way I started the process. I just wrote down, just downloaded every piece of information I had about characters in the book, about plot lines, about questions I have. I just put it all on the page. And then I work my way through all of that content, and I winnow out what I don't want to keep, and I refine and I build on the core pieces of the story. And then in the end, or somewhere in the middle, I end up with an outline and a structure more like the organized person starts with, and create my content on the chapter by chapter basis. So no one style is a proven success model. You work with what you have, what works best for you. Almost every author I work with has to do some kind of research. Certainly for nonfiction writing, you're going to be doing research. But even with fiction writing, so many authors will, if you're setting your story in any historical context, obviously you have to do research there. If you're setting your story in another location other than the one you're most familiar with, you'll want to do your research there. If you're setting your story in Pittsburgh, you don't want to make factual mistakes about Pittsburgh, the city of Pittsburgh or the area around Pittsburgh, because readers will forgive you and one or two errors of fact, but they will not forgive many. And so if they find multiple factual errors in your writing, they are likely to give up on your writing and move on. So it's important to do your research. Book coaches are a fairly new phenomenon. I've never heard of book coaches until probably 5 years ago. Book coaches, well, the best book coaches, in my opinion, are trained developmental editors who also act as coaches. And that means that they will help you with your planning, with your implementation, in the sense that they will be an accountability partner. But they are also capable of helping you with the storyline, with plot line, with character development, with organization, because they are skilled developmental editors. They can read your content and give you feedback in a way that's really useful early in the writing process. There are also book coaches who don't have that editorial experience, so they are really acting just as, I shouldn't say just, but they are acting as an accountability coach and maybe a brainstorming partner. The skills they bring to the process are different than the editorially trained coaches. And then finally, if you want to publish a book, but you don't have the time or the skill or the inclination to develop that skill of writing, then you can hire a ghostwriter. And ghostwriting usually takes place in 3 or 4 meetings where you sit down with your ghostwriter for a period of several hours. You download your ideas for your story to that ghostwriter. They take that material, they go off and they write your book, and they bring it back. And so ghostwriting is expensive, as you can imagine. And so most folks don't have the resources to opt for that last option, but certainly celebrities, politicians use them liberally. I talked earlier about developing a daily writing habit. I love Stephen King's book. It's called On Writing. In it, he talks about how when he started out, he would go into his office every day at the same time, the same place, open up his Mac or PC and begin to write. And he committed to a number of hours that he wrote each day. Some writers commit to a number of words that they'll complete each day. But when that commitment is made, it's important that you not leave that desk, that office, that computer until you've accomplished that goal. And even if that means you're sitting at the screen and you can't think of what to write, some writers and writing teachers say that just continuing to type, I can't think of what to say, I'm stuck, just writing is the solution to getting stuck, because you will eventually start to write through the challenge that you're faced with, and you'll find your way. As a writer, everyone has to learn to self-edit. I have never seen anyone write a first draft of anything that was publishable. Everything needs to be read and edited at least once by the author, but truthfully, many times, and preferably by skilled, objective eyes as well. You'll want to seek objective reviews. If you're only asking your family and friends to read your content, you're not going to get the kind of feedback that you may most need, because family and friends love us, and they are looking for the compliments they can give you, the positive feedback they can give you. They often feel uncomfortable giving you constructive criticism, and they may not feel skilled enough to give you that constructive feedback. They may feel like something's wrong with the content they're reading, but they don't know how to even articulate that for you. And certainly they can't articulate how to make it better. So you really need objective eyes reading your manuscript at different stages of its development. Preferably, you want experienced editors, but joining a writing group and having other writers be your beta readers is also an excellent option. I strongly encourage folks to join writing groups. And then finally, if you want to be a good writer, I would argue, and a lot of good, very skilled writers would argue, that you have to be a reader. You have to be reading the best books being written in your genre, or in the best books being written in any genre. Reading good writing gives you ideas. It gives you ideas for specific vocabulary. It gives you ideas for ways to express, ways to use the language to express certain ideas. There's really no shortcut to reading if you want to be a good writer. With editing, there are three basic types of editing. We use all three at Bold Story Press on our manuscripts. The first, the most complex and the most expensive, is developmental editing. And developmental editors are trained to read the manuscript and give you feedback on macro issues as well as micro issues in the manuscript. So they're going to read for plot. They're going to read for character development. They're going to read for tension. Are you creating a sense of tension in your work such that your reader wants to continue reading and continue turning the page? And they're going to give you feedback on these things, as well as suggestions in the margins. We all work in track editing in Word. And so they're going to give you suggestions for ways that they might frame the content when they're telling you, no, you don't want to say it this way. You want to say it this way. So developmental editors are really able to help you on many different levels of the manuscript. And they start by reading the complete manuscript and then doing a line edit, line by line. Copy editors are the next level of expertise, and copy editors are reading largely for grammar and style and punctuation. they're less likely to suggest major plot changes or major story changes. They are going to be looking for issues of style. Every publishing house follows a style manual. At Bold Story Press, we follow the Chicago Manual of Style, and most publishing houses do, or book publishing houses, I should say. And so they're going to be reading for grammar, actually editing and making changes in the body of your manuscript as they work their way through. And then when the author comes back, gets that manuscript from the copy editor, they're either accepting the copy editor's changes or they're not accepting them. And in some cases, making the case or the explanation for why they don't want to make those changes. And then finally, after the book has been developmentally edited and copy edited, the book is sent to the compositor so that the pages can be made up. And after the book has been made up, that used to be called the galley phase, but everything's digital now, so we don't really have galley pages anymore. But at that point, we have a proofreader read the manuscript, because a proofreader will read for any errors that the developmental editor or the copy editor missed, but also for any errors that the compositor may have introduced. And there are almost always some errors that the compositor introduces, and they tend to be spaces where they don't belong. Sometimes a word or a letter might be cut off from the last word in a sentence. And so those are the kinds of errors that they're reading for, and they're marking up the manuscript that's then shared with the author, and those corrections go back to the compositor for correction before we have a final manuscript. The next phase is design. Most of my authors love this part of the process. We meet with our authors and we ask them to bring to the meeting. Well, first we ask them to describe the book for our designers, to talk about the look and feel that they want for their book cover. We ask them to talk about comparable books in the market and bring samples or examples of those covers. We ask them to bring examples of covers that they love and covers that they hate, so we get an idea for color and fonts and other design issues that they are drawn to or really hate. And based on that meeting, our designer goes off and creates usually 5 or 6 different sketches. We call them sketches, but of course everything's digital. And so there are 5 or 6 designs, really book designs, that the author can then look at and make a decision about. They may love one of those designs just as it is, but more often they love the color and the fonts from this design. They love the images from this design. And there's a process of revision that then happens until we get the final cover design. And then the interior of the book also has to be designed. So even black and white, nonfiction or fiction books without any illustrations, no photos, no art, those interiors still need to be designed. Each chapter has its own treatment, its own design treatment. The fonts have to be chosen for the book, both for the body of the text and for the titles and the A heads, for the front matter and the back matter. So after the interior of the book is designed, the author sees a couple of different renditions of that and makes choices. And then finally, if there is an art program, photographs or 4-color art, the designer makes the decisions about where the art is placed in the body of the manuscript so that it is as close to the content that describes it as possible, but still each page is a beautiful page that is balanced and made up in a way that is most going to engage the reader. Production is everything that happens to a book after the manuscript is considered final. And so after you've been through the developmental editing and copy editing, with your editors. We then call the manuscript final manuscript, and the production manager takes that manuscript and begins the work. She manages the design process. So she sets up those meetings, assigns the designers, and she does all of the back office work that one needs to do to create a book. And that includes the metadata research for keywords for the book. We assign ISBNs, we register the copyright, we register the book with the Library of Congress. We make sure that the book is formatted as an ebook and a print title in both paperback and hardcover, if that's what the author chooses. We're choosing trim sizes, and usually the genre dictates the trim size. Most memoirs are 5x8. We choose the color and weight of the paper. So most trade books are 50-pound paper, untreated. If you are publishing an art book with 4-color art, you're going to go with 70-pound or maybe even 100-pound paper with that is treated, so that the art, the 4-color ink, lies on top of that page instead of being absorbed by the cotton in the page, which will make your images look fuzzier and not as precise. So the choice of your paper and the color of your paper, some genres dictate white paper, some prefer cream paper. So as publishers, we know about which markets dictate which choices, but at any point in the process, an author can decide, I don't care if memoirs are all cream colored on 5x8, 50-pound paper. I want my book to be 5.5 by 8.5 on white paper. And that is an option that any author can exercise. And if you are self-publishing, you will be educating yourself about all these decisions, probably on Google, where there is plenty of information about how to self-publish and these decisions that you have to make. And then finally, after all those decisions are made, you end up with a book that is ready to publish. And at that point in the trade market, you want to stop the process and create your advanced reader copies. So they are fully designed, fully edited copies that have a banner on them that say advanced reader copy. And then you start your promotion campaign. You have to start usually 3 to 6 months in advance. Many review sites will not consider a book unless it's at least 3, if not 4 months in advance. And that's because of the backlog that they have of titles, and they do not want to review the book after it has published. So you really have to stop the process then, send your manuscript or your digital PDF off to these review sites like Kirkus, like Publishers Weekly, like the New York Times, to either get into their calendar or secure a review from them. As you can imagine, with 2 million books being published every year now, it is not easy to get selected for review from major sites. And so Kirkus and Publishers Weekly now make a paid review an option for authors. So if your book is not selected for the free editorial review, you can choose to buy a review from Kirkus or Publishers Weekly. They will not guarantee or compromise on the quality of that review. If they don't like it, they're going to give you a bad review. Then it's your option to share that feedback with people or not. You don't have to share a bad review with anyone. But if the review is good, or there are quotes in the review that are usable, you're taking those quotes and putting them onto your Amazon page. You may include that on your back cover copy and in ads that you run on Amazon or Google. When you are launching and promoting your book, If you believe that your book has real sales potential, you may decide that you want to hire a book publicist, and they work with authors to promote books over those 3 to 6 months, or you may decide to do that yourself. And again, there are many classes and loads of content on the internet, free content on the internet, that will educate you about how to do that. Getting reviews on Amazon and on Goodreads is very important in the process. Getting reviews from other print sites are all going to help you sell more copies. So you really can't skimp on this part of the process. If you want your book to find its way to your readers, you have to do the work. There are 3 basic options for publishing. The last one that I list here on this bulleted list is not really a publisher per se. Traditional publishers, you all know, those are the Penguins, Random House, Simon & Schuster, etc. To publish with a traditional publisher, you must have an agent. When I was starting out as an editorial assistant, there was a friend who had the cubicle next to mine, and we were both editorial assistants. And I stayed in the nonfiction side of publishing, and she went over to the trade side and took a job with Macmillan in the children's section, and eventually worked her way up to editor-in-chief of the children and young adult list at Macmillan. She described that it was 25 years ago, I think at least, when they had reached the point where they had 35,000 unsolicited manuscripts coming in a year. And it was simply not possible for them to keep up with the volume of manuscripts that they were receiving, because the huge majority of those manuscripts are not good enough to publish. But you have to look through all of them in order to determine that. And that required dedicating staff to that process where, only 10% or 20% of the volume were actually books that they would consider. So it was at that point that they decided they needed a gatekeeper between themselves and the writing public. And that's when they made the decision that in order to be considered for publication at their publishing house, that your manuscript had to be vetted by an agent, and they would only receive manuscripts from agents from that point forward. All of the other major publishers immediately followed suit. And that's why today one must have an agent in order to get your manuscript in front of an acquisitions editor. Today, it's as hard to get an agent as it once was to get a traditional publisher to look at your manuscript. And again, it's just because of the sheer numbers. So writing a good query letter, knowing something about strategy when it comes to getting an agent to read your material is important if you want to be considered. The traditional publishing business model is one where usually they pay a small advance upfront to unknown authors, somewhere between $5,000 and $15,000. That advance is not a gift. It is an interest-free loan. You will repay that advance before you start to draw on the royalties from book sales. And then the traditional publisher pays for the editorial, the design, and all of the expenses associated with the book. When the book publishes, the traditional publisher gives the author between 8 and 10% of the royalties. With self-publishing, you do all of these steps yourself. You educate yourself on the internet. There are some self-publishing companies out there that will do some of this work for you. But you find your editors, you find your designers, you register your book and get your ISBNs, etc. And when you publish your book, you get 100% of your royalties. The challenging part about self-publishing is finding good editors and good designers, because there are scam artists out there who will take your money and not improve your manuscript in any reasonable or significant way. And some people just don't want to invest the time to learn everything there is to be learned, or that has to be learned, to publish the book on your own. And then finally, hybrid publishing, which is a fairly new phenomena, maybe 10 years old. Bold Story Press is a hybrid publisher. We really position ourselves in between traditional publishing and in self-publishing, in the sense that everyone on our team comes from the traditional publishing world. We are all editors and designers and acquisitions folks who work for traditional publishers. All of my people have worked at least 20 years for traditional publishers. And then we take the book through the process as we would have at McGraw-Hill or Random House. We charge a flat fee up front, and that means that the author shares in the risk of publishing with us. They pay that flat fee that covers a lot of the costs of editorial and design. And then when the book is ready to be published and publishes, instead of copywriting the book under our name, we copyright the book under the author's name so that they own all the rights to their book. And we pay our authors 60% of the royalties instead of 10%. So hybrid is really in between those two options. And then finally, an editorial service provider. They're a vanity press. Editorial service providers, they'll work with anyone who has the money. With hybrid publishing and traditional publishers, the lists are curated. That means that we reject any manuscript we don't think is good enough to publish under our imprint. And for Bold Story Press, that means that we reject about between 60 and 70% of the manuscripts we reject. An editorial service provider will publish anyone's book, any content, as long as you have the money. And they work with a big list of freelance editors and designers. They do vet them in some ways, but generally speaking, you're not going to get the same quality of editorial and design work with an editorial service provider. So if you want to publish a book, there are many options open to you, and these are the most common. I'm going to leave you with this quote: "Those who tell the stories rule the world." And ask if you are on social media that you like us or follow us at Bold Story Press. And thank you for being here today. And I'm very happy to answer any questions or share information with you if that would be helpful. You can take yourself off video or leave yourself off video. It doesn't matter to me, and I'll open it up to questions.
Hey, Emily, thank you very much. I thought it was well done. I'm sitting in for my wife, who's elsewhere volunteering today.
Okay.
I saw your invitation to participate in this in what's called the civil list here in Mexico, in San Miguel de Allende. I'm wondering,
okay.
Where are you, or why did you market it to expats in San Miguel?
So we market really only to neighborhood listservs on Google. And I started this publishing house 2 years ago here in Washington, D.C. And there is this vibrant, dynamic community of listservs in the Washington, D.C. area. And that's where we started marketing our webinars. And then we went in and just looked for other community listservs, and I'm sure that's how we found yours. So
Thank you.
it's, I mean, we really have only marketed to these local listservs, and in 2 years, we've had 1,200 women sign up for our webinars, which is unbelievable. Now only 600 have shown up, but that's, you know, pretty typical. You know, when something is free, about 50% of people show up. So yeah.
Well, thank you.
You're welcome. Other questions?
Yes. So what is the fee? The fee to publish then? What is
So we charge a flat fee up front of $10,000, and that covers all of the expenses except for developmental editing. If your manuscript does need developmental editing, we charge separately for that. So it covers, you know, copy editing, proofreading, design, and all of the other steps in the process. We do some marketing and promotion with our authors. We do a lot of training and help with strategy. But if you, in order to really promote your book, we recommend that you either hire a publicist, or in the next several weeks, we're going to start making some marketing packages available to our authors. So
and
that's
what
what it
about
looks.
distribution? What
We
kind of
work with
distribution?
Ingram and Amazon. So Ingram is the largest book publisher in the world. They distribute to 39,000 retail outlets, libraries, bookstores, box stores, etc. And they market to all English-speaking markets. And we also have the ability to market to non-English speaking markets if we want to do translations. We upload our titles to Ingram and to Amazon because Amazon is both a distributor and a retail outlet. And Amazon requires a 40% discount from us, and Ingram requires a 53% discount. And since the majority of your sales will come from Amazon, we want our authors to get that larger royalty payment. So we upload to both Ingram and Amazon.
So when the contract is about done and your book is ready to come out, do we have to decide how many books to print, or how does that work? Is it print on demand, or how do we do that?
So we work with print on demand.
Okay.
And so that, you know, there are pros and cons to print on demand versus offset printing. One of the pros is that you can better manage your risk. You don't have to commit to a 5,000 print run and pay for that upfront. And books are shipped, you know, as soon as they're ordered from Amazon and Ingram to retail outlets and Amazon to customers. It's more expensive. Print on demand unit costs are more expensive than offset printing. And so that's the downside. If a book takes off and is wildly successful, we have the ability to do print runs so that we can get those lower costs. But the majority of our books are done print on demand.
Okay. Thank you.
Other questions? Ruth, did you have a question? I can't hear you. You're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, sorry about that. I should be better at. I've written 7 books, and I did it with a person who was able to set it up on Amazon, and she took another job where she's unable to do that anymore. But I have a lot of experience working with a cover designer where I designed covers with her, and I did a lot of it myself, including the editing and that kind of thing.
What kinds of books, Ruth? Are they fiction or nonfiction?
They're nonfiction, and they're all on Amazon.
Wonderful. Good for you.
Well, thank you, but it was problematic, and I won't bore you with the details. But I was left with the last book, the 7th book, where the person who was handling the Amazon switch disappeared and gave it to her husband, who didn't know anything about it, and I lost a year and a half on that.
Oh,
But you know, it's life. So my question is, I know a lot of this myself, and you know, as in terms of, I designed and I have a lot of the illustrations, you know, and that kind of thing. And So I was wondering when you can do some of it yourself, like book cover design and that kind of thing. I have a really good book designer, and I'm really proud of my book covers, actually. How does that affect the payment to you if you want to do some of it yourself?
I'm sorry, will you say that again?
Sure. You said that a lot of the payment to you covers book cover design and that kind of thing.
Right.
Now, I've done that myself with a designer, and it was very inexpensive because she's a long-term friend of mine. And I think the book covers are quite effective, if I do say so myself, but you can decide yourself by looking at it. So if I did some of that myself, and I do a lot of the editing, I did all the editing myself. So since a lot of that is a kind of like a portion of self-publishing, how does that affect your charge? If the author or if the writer wants to do a lot of that herself?
Well, so a couple of things. I should mention that I'm happy to set up a call with anybody who's here today, a one-on-one call if you have questions and want to talk about them. And Ruth, I think it might be better for us to do that. We wouldn't, if we're not using our designers and our editors, we wouldn't charge you for that. So we would, we do adjust the pricing when that happens. But I don't think we'd publish any books that weren't edited by us, because that's, a big part of what we do. And I've just never in my life worked with an author who was able to edit a book the way, an objective editor.
At the quality that you would.
Yeah, right.
I know,
But
it shows you how arrogant I am.
well, no, confident. But let's talk. And I'd be happy to
telephone
talk.
number.
Well, we'll follow up with an email and
Great.
we'll set up a
It's
call.
Ruth@ruthschimmel.com.
Okay, great. And Else Marie, do you have your hand up? I can't tell. Yes. You take yourself off mute.
You're not talking to me.
I can't hear you. No, to Else Marie.
Oh, you're finished with me.
Yeah.
Okay,
Thanks, Ruth.
thank you.
Can you take yourself off mute, Else Marie? I can't hear you. I'm not sure why there's a red X in the box there. I've never seen that. Well, tell you what, if you can take yourself off mute, I'll come back to you, or you can write your question in the chat if you'd like. And I'll Lauren.
Hi, Emily. Thank you. I have two questions. One is, I think I remember you saying that you started your publishing company roughly 2 years ago or so. So my first question is, what do you see as the future, since you don't have a very long past, in terms of your company and your not willingness, but your plans to continue with this business in the future? How do you see that for yourself?
Well, when I left publishing, I started a business called Bold in Business, and I wrote an 8-week class, and I wanted to teach young women, like in their 30s and 40s, how to own their power in the business world, because I had struggled so much with that people-pleasing thing and the perfectionism thing, and I really wanted to help young women, get past that. And so I did that for 4 years, and then got to the point where we were in the COVID lockdown. The political stuff happening in the world was so discouraging to me, and I decided that the world would be in a much better place if half of the decision makers in Congress and in, in corporate America and in broadcast media were women. And they're not, of course, they're not even close. So I decided to start this publishing house and publish women only, because women have always faced obstacles in the traditional publishing industry to publishing. And I feel like it's, when we can get more women's stories out into the world, that the younger women coming behind us will at least have a better chance, of learning some things and not having the same struggles that we did. And so I mean, this is a passion project for me, and I hope to, it's my goal to publish 75 books a year, and we hope to get to that within 5 years' time. We don't ever want to be bigger than that, and we want to be a community of women publishing enjoyable and important, work in nonfiction and fiction publishing. So I love what I'm doing, and I consider it to be important for the world.
It is important, and thank you for doing it. And then secondly, Emily, I'm wondering, does your company do anything with authors who would like to turn their books into audiobooks? Because I've gotten lots of compliments as a speaker on my voice. People seem to like my voice. And so I'm thinking maybe I'll turn my book into an audiobook at some point. Do you do anything in that area?
We do, yeah. We've just started, making audiobooks from our books. So yeah, and I'd be happy to talk to you about that if we talk one-on-one.
I'd love to. I will.
Great. Great. Okay. Other questions, Michael?
Emily, do you record? I think it said at the start that you record this session. Is it available on the website? Could my wife come back and watch it later today?
It's not on the website, but I'll send you a link to it. Yeah.
Oh, that'd be great.
When we're
Thank you
done.
very much.
Okay, sure. Gosh, Elsa Marie, I wish I knew how to help you there, but we can't hear you.
I have a quick
Leslie?
question. If you were to accept a manuscript today and it was green lighted to go forward in your process, when would it come out?
So usually the process takes about 6 months. And then the author, makes the decision about how long they want for promotion. So sometimes the book then publishes in 9 months because they want 3 months for promotion. And sometimes it publishes in a year because they want 6 months for promotion. But we usually can take the author through the whole process in 6 months, and sometimes faster.
Okay.
Other questions?
I have a question. I've noticed that you have some children's titles on your list, and I was just wondering if you could talk a little bit about publishing picture books.
So we have published one children's picture book, and we've made the decision not to continue to publish in that market. Children's picture book publishing is so sophisticated and so specific that I think you're better off going with a publisher who's really dedicated to that market, because it's very, very much more complex than really many of the other genres we publish in. So I'm sorry, but yeah, we're not publishing in, we do publish paragraph books for children, at the grade school level, and but not picture books anymore.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Lauren.
I'm wondering if Elsa Marie could perhaps put her question in the chat box for us.
Absolutely. Elsa Marie, do you know how to do that? Okay, well, I will follow up with you, Elsa Marie, with an email so that we get to talk, so I can answer your question. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll be sure to send you all an email, and I hope to talk to you again. And good luck with your writing, and please publish your work however you choose to do it. I hope you will one day have that published book in hand. Thank you. And the person who is here under the name iPhone, can you tell me who that is? I can't. Are you there, iPhone? I can't hear you. Is that your iPhone, Elsbury? Hi, iPhone.